Meanwhile, Mike Waltz, the US National Security Advisor, at the same event spoke to criticize Kyiv and speaking very much in line with his boss, Trump.
His frustration with President Zelensky is that you've heard is multifold. One, there needs to be a deep appreciation for what the American people, what the American taxpayer, what President Trump did in his first term, and what we've done since. So some of the rhetoric coming out of Kyiv, frankly, and insults to President Trump were unacceptable.
Excuse me, Mike Waltz there speaking from the White House, as the scene there clearly showed. Let's get some analysis and bring in Antonio Missiroli, former NATO Assistant Secretary General. Antonio, thank you very much for being with us here in France 24. We appreciate your time. Give us your sense of where we are right now.
The impression, of course, is that relations between Kyiv and Washington are very bad right now. They are very bad both personally and politically. The language that has been used over the past few days has made things worse. It is very difficult when and how two main players in this dispute will be able to get out of the hole if they want to at this stage. At the same time, of course, the things are not going to stop now, and there will be further steps next week with meetings. I understand President Macron and Keir Starmer will go to the White House to talk to Trump, and maybe some reason will prevail at this stage in order at least to lower the tone of this debate.
It's a question I'm going to put to you now that I'd like to put to President Trump, but it's not that easy to get right to him. What do you think has made him take the stance that he's decided to take right now?
Well, I think Europeans are confronted with a difficult situation, in particular, because they are increasingly realizing that probably the burden of the possible ceasefire deal will be most on them, and not only the financial or the political burden, but in particular the military burden. And that is a difficult situation right now. It was in part unexpected, and in part could be expected. Little preparedness has been made to this effect. There have been these meetings in Paris this week. They are still at a very informal level, but it will be challenging for Europeans to take over a difficult mission of trying to contribute more to a deal that they want to co-shape, to contribute to shaping, but at the same time, Moscow being also prepared to implement the deal on the ground, where the availability for spending more and supporting Ukraine is there already. It's quite clear. Whether political support is still there inside the European Union and in Europe at large, of course, the risks implied by a possible presence on the ground after the ceasefire are very, very high.
Of course, it's worth pointing out that Europe actually has given more towards Ukraine's fight against Russia than the United States, and Donald Trump has exaggerated the amount, of course, almost doubling it, and fact-check that, and you see that Trump is actually not telling the truth. Anthony, can I ask you about the future of NATO? Because with Trump's rhetoric, with Trump's position that he's taking, I think it's pretty clear that slipping out of NATO is something that he wouldn't dismiss as a possibility, and I'm sure Vladimir Putin would be on the side applauding that. Can NATO survive if Trump decides to take such a route?
Well, I would say two things have been worrying over the past few days. It's not only the declaration whereby Ukraine will not be part of NATO, and that is not under discussion coming from Washington and not just from the White House. And the second one, of course, is the willingness to transfer to Europeans the main burden of securing Europe at large. And I think Europeans are unprepared for this, and NATO may be a very different thing if the Americans start to disengage. Such disengagement in military terms may not happen right away, may not happen overnight, it may take time, but clearly there has already been a degree of weakening of the American security guarantee, and to some extent even the credibility of Article 5. This is worrying, and I think Europeans have to think seriously about what they want to do to that effect. NATO, in my personal view, remains a deterrent of last resort and a toolbox that Europeans cannot do without. And I think they should probably start conceiving of a different transatlantic bargain about the alliance, whereby it would become more European. Europeans would have to put more both financially and militarily, into the security and defense of Europe, but they have to make an effort to preserve a degree of American engagement and presence on the continent, because that, at least in the short and medium term, remains essential.
So this, if I'm understanding what you're talking about here, Antonio, this would involve major European investment in the defence sector. It would involve major investment in producing military hardware, less reliance on the United States. But of course, at the present moment in time, the production capacity is all on the other side of the Atlantic, isn't it? That's where most of the arms are coming from.
I think there are two aspects, also in terms of timing. In the short term, it is very difficult for European defense industry to increase spectacularly output production, be it about ammunition or more complex weapon systems. And therefore, they may still have to rely, at least for certain capabilities, on what they buy from the Americans. This could be something that could even help assuage Donald Trump in the short term. In the medium term, however, Europeans need to do more and can do more if they make full use of the tools they have, including the single market. There are ideas already on the table put forward by Mario Draghi and other reports that have been produced recently to achieve that. The European Commission is thinking seriously about putting more money when their mouth is. And I think that is going to materialize, but not necessarily in the short term. So I think we have this décalage, this gap between what is needed now and what can be done in a few years' time that has to be breached and has to be addressed properly by Europeans.
Antonio Missiroli, thank you very much for your time and your analysis you shared with us here in France 24. We really appreciate it. Antonio Missiroli is the former NATO Assistant Secretary General. Thank you, sir, for being with us here on France 24. Emmanuel